When you lose an election in a democracy, you deserve to. You don't look at the electorate and ask them, what were you thinking? You look at yourself and ask, what were we doing?
Indeed, and we'll probably revisit this video in May, although we'll have to be quick about it because I would expect Starmer to be gone very soon after the May elections, because those results are going to be absolutely catastrophic, and they're going to be on the back of three diabolical blows to Starmer's leadership, beginning with the Mandelson scandal, which he survived. With Gorton and Denton, it's another blow. We've got Labour backbenchers already publicly speaking out about him, about his leadership, but he'll ride the storm for this. And then next month, we've got the trial of 3 or 4 young men from Eastern Europe. That's going to be very difficult for the PM, but again, this is really, really tight leading up to the May elections. So I'd expect Starmer to still be in place by the May elections, but after the May elections, he's a goner. It's not good if you are a reform supporter, or let's say if you're on the left and you're supporting the Greens or one of those other parties, you want Starmer to stay. You want Keir Starmer to be Prime Minister of this country for as long as possible, because he is toxic. He's destroying the Labour Party. And the longer he stays on, the more damage he does. And we don't know who's going to follow. If it's someone like Streeting or Rayner, then they are already compromised by various things. Tax, relationships with Mandelson, this kind of things, they're already tainted. But it's not necessarily, as we've seen in the past, it's not necessarily going to be the favourite that comes in to take over from Starmer. It could be someone else who is not tainted, who can bring something to the table that isn't tyrannical, that doesn't want to crush people's liberty and invade people's privacy all the time. Maybe they will bring the boats down. Who knows? Anything could happen. Be careful what you wish for. So, honestly, from our point of view as an anti-Labour campaign group, we want Starmer to stay. Starmer, keep Starmer, please, for as long as possible. But, unfortunately, he will be gone after May. Now, with regards to Gorton and Denton, a lot of people out there, most people out there will be disappointed with the result. And I'm talking about people who are on the right of the political spectrum. People not necessarily reform supporters or reform voters, but people that would have preferred reform to win. Because even if you're a die-hard Tory, you are looking at that election, you know that your party's got no chance to win. There's two hard left, well, there's one hard left party, there's Labour, and then there's Reform. You're going to want Reform to win. And let's face it, right? Going into that election, looking at that seat as it stands, 30%, almost 30% Muslim, a lot of students, some middle class enclaves, and then the rest of the ward, a mixture of demographics, but a lot of white working class that you would expect to vote Reform mostly. It was an absolutely outrageously stunning result for Reform. They finished second, right? Okay. With more than 10,000 votes. That's more than one in 7 of the electorate, and it's only 40% turned out. So you do the. I'm not good at maths, but you do the maths there. That's an impressive result. to go from where they were in 2024. I think they were on like 4,000 votes or something. They've added 6,000 votes on. Absolutely unbelievable result. But they could have won it. They absolutely could have won it. And that's where the disappointment seeps in, because Reform are like this, become this like electoral juggernaut that is winning elections left, right, and centre. Big mayoral elections, by-elections, council, winning control of councils up and down the country. By-election, they won the first Westminster by-election of this Parliament in Runcorn last year. And they did amazingly well in this by-election in a seat that is not really anywhere near their top sort of target seats anyway. I mean, just remember that Reform surged past Labour, which have held this seat or the constituencies in this area for the best part of a century. So Reform surged past Labour. It was only the Greens obviously surged past a bit further, too far in front. So don't be disheartened. There is a narrative being played out now, especially on social media by people on the left, Labour supporters, media type people, idiots that don't understand how elections work. They're trying to paint a picture that the Reform are finished, the bubbles burst, they're in a downward spiral now. It's absolute nonsense. Reform are knocking it out of the park in terms of they're leading the national polls still. They are still winning elections all the time. So Reform is still knocking it out of the park. But I mean, we see this on X week in, week out. When we're compiling the council by-elections, the results for those, I see these comments all the time from people. Reform didn't win. Reform didn't win this one. That they've lost. Reform, mocking the party almost, and you're looking at it and you're thinking, but they never had the seat to begin with. You're looking at, like, so for instance, last Thursday, it was a rare set of by-elections in which Reform didn't win any. But there were 3 Labour seats. And Labour lost all 3. Right, one was to the Greens, one was to Lib Dems, and one was to Plaid. Right, and then you've got people saying that Reform lost. No. Hang on. Well, Labour lost. You can't lose a seat that you never had in the first place. Right, Labour lost. They lost all 3. It doesn't matter who won those seats. The big story there should be Labour had 3 council seats and they lost all 3 in different parts of the country. Right, that's the story right there. But you got people that don't understand how elections work, can't see that in actual fact, Reform finished second in this one, or maybe third in another, or they got 30% of the vote and they never stood in that ward ever before. They don't see that is absolutely huge result for that party, right? They just see the fact that, there were no gains for Reform. They lost. Right, okay. But you're missing the fact that Labour lost all 3. Right, and I see these stupid comments week in, week out. If you're from, Reform are now like this electoral winning machine. But if you're from a smaller party and you're going into any kind of election where you've never stood a candidate before and you're getting 30%, 40% of the vote, that's huge, right? That's huge. You might not be enough to defeat the incumbent, but it's the incumbent is the one that is there to lose the election. They're the one defending the seat. As an outsider looking in at the Gorton and Denton by-election, the big story there is the fact that Labour, the incumbent party, finished third. And the other big story is that the Green Party, that's never won a Westminster by-election before, came first. And then there's much smaller stories down the head below the headlines. Then is you've got the sectarian aspect of it, and then you've also got the fact that Reform finished second. They more than doubled the vote, and they overtook the Labour Party. That's not the story that will be portrayed. The story that will be portrayed is, oh, Reform haven't won. The bubbles burst. They're on a, you know, that is a fake news story.
And look at it! Vote Hannah Spencer! Vote Hannah Spencer! Vote Hannah Spencer!
Let's talk about these idiots. They are idiots, very dangerous idiots, whether they know it or not. I'm not talking about the puppet master there. I'm talking about the Green Party itself, the activists, the people that drive party policy. You know, look at the plank that they put up in Gorton and Denton. Hannah Spencer. You know, the
was we came together and we stuck up for each other.
But you've never asked why.
She very much reminds me of Zara Sultana. You know, Zara Sultana is very petulant, immature. Hannah Spencer. You know, the dancing in the street on polling day. For Jeremy Corbyn's social media clip, she is one of the biggest reasons that party has been participation in no man's land since it was established about 8 months ago. She's a walking disaster, and I'm not saying that Hannah Spencer shares, you know, many of those characteristics, but the way that they conduct themselves, can't think beyond what she's both very much been indoctrinated with, like a student. She is the biggest liability straight out of university and into politics. And unfortunately, this is the demographic that green policies will appeal to. You know, there aren't many. You know, if you sat people down and explained to them what the Green Party stands for, what its policies are, you're not going to get many people supportive of those policies. You will get students, you know, young, radical, revolutionary students. You will get, you know, those bourgeois, middle-aged people who are still lefties, you know, despite the fact that they've lived a life and they're still, you know, on the hard left. They're still looking for the, you know, the Marxist revolution. Those are the only people that are going to actually support the policies that are laid out in front of them. In Gorton and Denton, they pulled a blinder. I personally didn't feel that. I thought that going after the Muslim demographic, the Pakistani population, was a little bit short-sighted, and it wasn't going to quite wing it for them, but obviously it did. But they're not going to win constituencies up and down the land across the country in very different constituencies with different demographics. They're not going to do that because their policies don't appeal to the masses. One of the things that will backfire on Labour and will help the Greens in any sort of big general election is this decision to reduce the voting age to 16. Now, Labour have done that because they thought initially, when they did that, when they introduced that policy, they thought this will keep us in power. Because obviously they knew fairly quickly after they were elected that they were already struggling with regards to the polling, popularity, etc., was plummeting very quickly. So they brought that policy in with the 16-year-olds to keep them in power. They thought it was going to keep them in power. It's not. It's actually almost certainly going to backfire on them, because 16-year-olds that are have enrolled into university, or enrolled into college, that have just come out of school, that have been taking in all that that climate propaganda and white privilege and all the other leftist crap that they pick up in schools now. Those that are going to vote for a party on the left, they ain't going to vote for the Labour Party. They're going to vote Green, or Jeremy Corbyn's party, maybe, if he ever gets his act together. But they'll if there's a general election now, the Greens would do exceptionally well in that demographic, that 16 to 18-year-old demographic. They'll do very well there, and all the polling suggests that they would. So this is going to backfire on Labour, but it's not going to deliver a Green majority in any general election. Especially the way that they've gone after this. They've singled this demographic out in Greater Manchester, and they haven't been quiet about it. Everyone's going to see that. Everyone has seen it. It's a talking point.
Vote for Gaza, vote for Palestine, vote for Gorton and Denton. Let's make our area the best it can be.
They can take seats, and they will take seats off Labour in seats like Gorton and Denton. Seats that have got a large Muslim population. Obviously, they've successfully played the sectarian card on this occasion, and if they keep doing that, as they did it, there was a council by-election last week in Leicester, which was 60% Muslim ward, and the Greens surged past Labour and won the seat. They took the seat off Labour. If they keep doing that, they're going to win seats in parts of Manchester, London, Birmingham, maybe even some of the mill towns. If Jeremy Corbyn's party doesn't get its act together, then of course, they will be the main sort of challenger on the left to the Labour Party. Long term, we've got Islamists on one side and hard left on the other. They are polar opposites in terms of their social outlook. Ultra-conservative Muslims and, debauched lefties forming an alliance. It's never going to last, never going to be long term. We've already seen interviews with some Muslim voters in Gorton who have expressed horror that they've just voted for a party that, wants to, legalise prostitution, illegal drugs, push Britain down this path of trans debauchery and anything goes sort of policies, like say insane stuff. And they didn't know. People are interviewing Muslim voters in Gorton, and they're saying, well, we didn't know that. And Sky News is asking Zach Polanski, you didn't put these policies to voters in Gorton, did you, Zach? And Polanski's lied through his teeth.
How was legalising drugs, legalising prostitution and greater protection for trans rights and trans people put to a Muslim community in Gorton and Denton?
It was put to a Muslim community, and in fact, frankly, the whole community, because the Green Party just ran an election there where they ran an astounding victory of over 4,000 majority.
Are those particular policies in your leaflets, your Urdu leaflets?
It's just a barefaced lie. The literature that was put out by the Green Party in Gorton, that the video in Urdu, the famous video, doesn't talk about trans people. There's no mention of trans people and the alphabet people, and legalising prostitution and drugs and all these things that are, anathema to the, ultra-conservative Muslim population. Talk about those, Zach. Just be honest about it. You were totally cynical about ingratiating yourself to that community with talking about Palestine and
रिफॉर्म हमारी कम्युनिटीज को तोड़ना चाहती हैं। वो उन खानदानों को डिपोर्ट करना चाहती हैं जो सालों से यहाँ रह रहे हैं और जो लोग बाहर पैदा हुए हैं उन पर ज्यादा टैक्स लगाना चाहती हैं। वो
the subcontinent. These were the kind of talking points that you put forward to the Muslim community in Gorton.
I think there's some deep assumptions there about what a conservative community is.
We can say what we like about Labour. They've done some horrible things. The nanny state stuff is what really turns people off Labour. It's not so much the immigrants being detained and deported and around stuff. Certain things are from. With the Greens, it's the policies. The policies are crazy, absolutely mental. It's going to turn people off. It's going to turn the masses off. So yes, they're going to win seats, but they're not going to win hundreds of seats. In this country, we have had countless wake-up calls in the past that have been ignored. The masses continue to have their heads planted in the sand. Gorton and Denton by-election result is another wake-up call. The way that the Greens won the election should be a huge wake-up call. The sectarian aspect of it, people should be able to see that the country has been balkanised now to such an extent that it's becoming unrecognisable, from the country of their birth, from the country that they were raised in, certainly what I was brought up in. And all, forecasts of the demise of native Britons they're totally underestimated. It's going to happen so much quicker because it's accelerating so fast. We're not talking now about decades. We're not talking about what Britain was like 10 years ago or 20 years ago. We're talking about what it was like 5 years ago. Soon it will be changing quicker. So, yeah, in the future, when these communities grow, so much bigger, that parties like the Greens, Trojan horse parties, will be able to win more seats. Maybe they'll have their own parties by then. But the next election obviously going to be very interesting. But after that, we haven't got many elections left. Before the English, the Welsh, the Scots, the Cornish, the Ulster men and women, the native peoples of this land are lost forever. So all these disparate political parties on the right, they can keep themselves, kings of their little castles and remain divided and split and taking votes off this party and that party. That's fine, but if they don't look at the bigger picture and put the country first, then the country dies. It's that simple. Everything that we held dear forever, for thousands of years, is going to go down the pan, and it's going to go down the pan very quickly.